I hereby call to order this meeting of the City of West Palm Beach Community Redevelopment Agency. It is Monday, October 2nd, October already, 2023, and the time is 3:01 p.m. And we will dive right into the agenda. So, Madam Clerk, do we have any cards for comments from the public?
No, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, we'll see what the board, whether the board has any comments. President Warren, have any comments?
No comments.
Commissioner Lambert, any comments?
Just, I had the pleasure of going on a tour with our CRA Executive Director of our CRA districts this weekend, and it's just a pleasure to see a lot of progress in our projects, and thank you so much for taking the time to do that. And I don't know if I was the last one of the commissioners to go on this tour, but if anybody hasn't done it yet, I highly encourage it. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Ward?
No comments, Mayor.
Commissioner Fox?
No comments, thank you.
Commissioner Peduzzi?
No comments, thank you.
Okay, very good. Mr. Ruger, are there any additions, deletions, reorganization of the agenda?
Mayor, there's one minor reorganization, if I could request. 8.5 is associated with 8.3. So if we could maybe put those back to back, they are related to the same agenda item.
All right, so you want 8.5 to now be 8.4?
Yes, sir.
And 8.4 to become 8.5. Right?
Thank you.
Okay. Very good. We'll move to presentation and discussion regarding a solicited proposal for a line of credit offer from Valley National Bank for the purposes of redeveloping the Broadway corridor. Mr. Rube?
Thank you, Mayor. So TV18, we have a presentation should be loaded. It's loaded already, right, Anna? There it is. Okay. So, Mayor, as you and board members, as you may recall, we have been working on sort of a holistic strategy for BMUD, and one of those relates to our acquisition of property along the corridor. And going back to the past, around in 2022, there was actually a direction that was set by the board that we have been pursuing. And it's around this idea of borrowing in order to accelerate the acquisition portion of the Broadway mixed-use district master planning strategy. So I'm going to do a quick overview, then we'll talk a little bit about what we've accomplished so far, specifically with Dover Coal. Then we have Pete from PFM Financial Advisors. He's going to talk about that solicitation that went out. And then we'll talk about if the board does decide to give direction on moving forward with this line of credit, what those funds would be used for, and then looking for the board to establish some direction for staff and to answer any questions that you all may have. So briefly, this is the Broadway mixed-use district. It's the red line that is circled in blue. It's about a 2-mile length road that we're talking about, roughly from 25th to 59th Street, surrounded by several neighborhoods that use it on a regular basis. It's actually, because it's a sub-district of the CRA, it has very specific goals surrounding it, which all center around reimagining Broadway in a very intentional way. It's also outlined in the city's strategic plan under the built environment, which is Pillar 2. So it's pretty clear that the board and city commission want to see the Broadway mixed-use district addressed and rebuilt. So just to kind of recap how we've gotten to this point, as I mentioned in 2002, the CRA board at a work session actually gave some direction on 3 items. At the time, we were pursuing the ULI study that has since been completed and shared, and is still used by a lot of folks for data and things. We have now kicked off the BMUD study. And the last item, which is the item that we're presenting to you today, was investigating this idea of a loan for land purchases. But I do want to mention, as the picture shows, we have still been acquiring property with available funds. This was in 2002. We closed on those items. This is the Higgins property, and then quickly demolished the buildings as they weren't really usable. And that property has since been sodded and is essentially, for all intents and purposes, shovel ready. And then this year, we've kicked off Dover Coal. They're under contract, and their outreach has now begun. And to talk a little bit more about that is Ms. Aponte.
Good evening, Ana Maria Aponte, CRA Deputy Director. So as Chris was mentioning, the work with Dover Coal started in June this year, and the goal with Dover Coal was basically engage a professional to study the existing zoning regulation of the district and clearly identify what is, how to transform that regulation and modify it to spur redevelopment. The BMOD has been in place for several years, more than 10 years, and nothing has happened in the district. It's not only the fault of the regulation, but the regulation could be one of the elements that is causing the redevelopment not to move forward. So Dover Coal started working in June, and they basically conducted a regulatory analysis of the corridor. They review all the regulations, the zoning and land development regulations. They look at the ULI study. They look at different studies that have been conducted in the area, and also did a site visit with staff, a site visit with their by themselves, and basically analyze all the conditions to like have the framework of how to build a new set of regulations that will promote the redevelopment of this district. They did also, I mean, they come from a very strong background of urban context. They built on form-based codes. That is what it seems is the way to go with this district, as it is a very compact district. So they conducted, as we say, like the first analysis was done from June to September. And on September 20, they came over and conducted their first community outreach. It was split in 2 days. The first day was in the night of September 20, where they did a community meeting at the Manatee Lagoon. It was very successful. We were super excited about it. It's a lot of excitement in the community about this process. And despite there's similar processes that have happened in the past, I mean, it seems everybody is in a good mood this time to say, like, this is the time is ripe for Northwood. The market is there to basically tune up all the things that are necessary to spur the redevelopment. We have around 180 people attend the workshop. Dover Coal did a presentation, and then the bulk of the night was spent first on asking questions to the attendees, and different type of questions, like from how long have you lived in the corridor, or you live, work, or play in the corridor, to what type of corridor you envision, or what type of context you want. They also have individual meetings, like not individuals, like group meetings, tables set up. They have discussions with their neighbors, and then have a presentation to the rest of the group. In general, it was amazing to see how consistent was the whole response from the community. They all wanted a walkable environment, more mix of uses, more development, more activities, small business, and also they all talk, or the majority of the people talk about an inclusive corridor that has is to ensure that the corridor as it transforms is for everybody. So that was very interesting. And then the following day, they conducted individual meetings with some of the commissioners. We're still having, I think Commissioner Fox is still on the line for us to talk with them. And then they talk with some of the community organizations, with the Esperanza Center, with RISE, some of the property owners, commercial property owners, and a couple of the neighborhood associations. So they have individual meetings with them to hear more in detail what they are saying. This, of course, was the first step of the community. They are now taking all that feedback that they receive, and they are back on the table to draft proposals based on that. And they will bring some of the initial ideas at the end of the year for the city staff to review, and then we'll have an additional, or the next community outreach at the end of January, beginning of February, where we have, again, workshops to present the initial proposals to the community and receive feedback for that. We expect after that the first phase of the draft regulations will be around early summer for the City Commission to review and give the feedback. That's all the update for the BMOD study.
Nope.
Thank you.
They could put the presentation back up. TV 18. Okay. So,
Before, let's see, we have any questions before we move on from the BMUD, about the BMUD study? Commissioner Lambert?
Thank you. You said you had 180 people at that community outreach, and I attended, and I thought that was fantastic and great. I was so pleased to see so many people there. I was just curious because I know we've done other types of community input meetings in the past and not had that great of a turnout. What would you attribute that success to?
I think, I will say several things. I think it's an excitement in the community about this effort, and as I said, everybody feels like the time is right for Broadway to get redeveloped. We also did tons of direct mailers. We did a lot of social media. We put yard signs. We contacted RISE directly and the Esperanza Center and all the community organizations. I think probably social media is what we are seeing is the best way to bring the community, but a lot of it was like word of mouth. They were interested and they told everybody and they attended.
Well, I think that's really great because I had run into some individuals prior to this meeting, like an hour before I was heading over to this meeting, and they were, pretty down about it and just saying, oh my gosh, this again, we're talking about this again. And so when I walked into 180 people at that meeting, I was floored and really excited about that. So thank you so much for that effort.
Any other questions on BMUD before we move on? Okay, thank you. Okay, Mr. Root.
Mayor, I'd like to introduce Pete with PFM Advisors. They helped us actually conduct the solicitation that was put out for the line of credit. Pete?
Thank you, Chris. My name is Pete Verona, and as Chris mentioned, I'm with PFM Financial Advisors. We serve as financial advisor to both the city and the CRA. I am simply pulling up my presentation here. Give me one moment. Okay, there it goes. So without further ado, the CRA is considering taking out a line of credit. To explain briefly, the line of credit functions very similarly to if you all have used a personal line of credit in the past. Essentially, the municipality would draw on the line of credit over a certain amount of time, and then you will begin repayment after a set period. The bank and the municipality agree to the maximum amount that will be available under the line of credit, and that line of credit is secured by a source, and in this case, that would be tax increment revenues. A line of credit is most useful when project expenditure timeframes are uncertain. That allows you to draw money exactly when you need it and not before, and then you can pay it back after that draw period is done. So for this specific line of credit, we were reached out to by the CRA for a line of credit of about $5 million. This amount was to be used to be purchased properties, as has been discussed and will be discussed. Given the stated use, the CRA did not need the continuing access to the line of credit after it was done, so the line will be non-revolving. After the $5 million is drawn, there will be no more. So we sent out a solicitation on behalf of the CRA to about 75 plus participants in this market. It's a broader private placement market, and that includes banks that do lines of credit. And those responses were due at the end of July. So at the bid due date, we had received one response, and that response was from Valley Bank. Valley, as you may know, has a depository relationship with the CRA. So PFM then reached out to a couple market participants in order to gauge, perhaps why there was a lower response rate than maybe we expected. And what we found is that many banks told us that lending was starting to tighten up just due to exogenous market factors. They cited the Fed funds rate increases and how high interest rates are. It sounds like banks are starting to circle the wagons a little bit and are really trying to lend only to those they already have relationships with, or where they find they have an opportunity to potentially grow that relationship. Some also mentioned that $5 million was a little bit too small for them. In the municipal market, sometimes banks will limit their exposure to things that are $10 million and over. So that was a few comments that we received when we went to go get market feedback. So details about this line of credit and the conditions from Valley. This line would be outstanding for 2 years, and that's when the CRA can draw as needed. And then after that 2 years is when the payback on the line of credit begins, and that can be either 3 or 5 years. Or at the end of 2 years, you all can simply refinance that and roll it into a longer-term amortization if you all wanted to. The line can be tax exempt or taxable, and that just depends on the tax status of the projects. And the interest rate would change depending on if it's tax exempt or taxable. The rates are variable, so they would be set at the time you draw the money. But we estimated the rates today, and those rates would be 5.75% on a tax exempt basis or 8% on a taxable basis. And the 5.75 is similar to what we've seen for other tax exempt line of credits. In fact, we just had one that had us set today for a little over 5.8%, so this is right in line with what we see in the market. And the line is prepayable anytime without penalty, so again, as I mentioned before, if you want to refinance this line of credit into either long-term or just simply pay it off, those are all achievable without any sort of penalty. So that is a brief explanation of our process. I will take any questions you all have if there are any.
Any questions for, Commissioner Ward?
2 questions. What is the election process for the difference between the 3 or 5?
Can you talk into the mic?
Sorry.
please?
What's the election process for the 3 or 5 amortization?
That is simply a choice. The CRA can elect to either pay 3 or 5 years. So it really just depends on the time frame. An amortization over 3 years is going to cost more per year, but it'll be less overall. So it's sort of like a mortgage, 15 versus 30 years. So that would be the decision to be made.
Follow up.
Yes.
And then what are you using to set the interest rate? Wall Street or SOFR?
I believe it's SOFR. I actually have the proposal from Valley. Oh, no, I'm sorry. This is the prime rate.
Prime rate?
The prime rate. Is that correct?
And it's at the time of each draw?
At the time of each draw, correct. So you would look at the prime rate at that time, and then you would spread off of that.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Commissioner Peduzzi?
Will the draws be project-based? So once we have a property we've identified, we go ahead and probably do a draw based upon that particular property? Is that, I know a lot of these equity line of credit or the lines of credit that are available to businesses require, receipts and documentation. Are you going to require that, or will they require that?
Typically, that is, they'll require at least, they want to have an understanding of what you're spending money on. So when you go to draw, there may be some documentation involved there. But as you mentioned, typically when you go to draw, you're drawing pretty much exactly what you need and not any more at that time. And that's one of the that's one of the advantages of the line of credit, is that you can get that money as soon as you need it and not before. So for example, you're not withdrawing $5 million immediately and then paying interest on that full $5 million over the full 24 months.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Commissioner Lambert?
Thank you for addressing the point about only one bank responding.
Right.
We love Theus and we love Valley National Bank, and we know we've worked with them many times throughout the years on providing grants and loans to our small businesses, so thank you for that. I was just curious, and maybe this is for staff or city attorney, I would imagine that we've already thought through this, but I just want to double check. Since Theus sits on our CRA advisory board, is there any concern or conflict with this type of future relationship?
We will certainly look through that and advise on that issue.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Fox?
Thank you so much. I think it was one of the last meetings I had asked a question about whether or not we could be just borrowing from ourselves, from the city, from the CRA, maybe possibly borrowing from the city or from the other CRA. And I was just curious, I know Chris and I talked about it a little bit, but I just wanted, for the record, if you could give us a little bit more discussion, Chris, about why that would not be possible.
Sure. Thank you, Commissioner. Yes, when I spoke to the city administrator about it, due to the nature of many of the obligations that the city has related to the reserve fund and the amount that we were looking to borrow, the city administrator said it's just not possible at this time to borrow the funds directly from the city.
Any other questions? Okay. Next item.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Mayor, if I may, just
Yes.
a couple more slides here. Because I know we were switching between. Is it back on? Oh, there it is. Okay. And then just hit presentation mode. So as we mentioned, what we would use the funds for is essentially the property acquisition. And without getting too specific, we're essentially looking at the entire 2-mile corridor. And judging by current land values, it's estimated that we can acquire potentially 4 to 5 of those parcels. And just to be clear, the end game for all of this is to essentially provide that catalytic project where we can show the proof of concept of the BMUD regulations that are currently being reviewed. And so that once the Broadway mixed-use district regulations are in place, we have the land available to then work with the private sector to actually make a real project come to fruition and show that proof of concept of those regulations. So with that, board members, staff is simply looking for direction today to make sure that the board is comfortable to move forward with this initiative. And we did have a discussion with the CRAB on this item last Friday, and they are also supportive of moving forward. And with that, that concludes my presentation, Mayor.
Thank you very much. I, for one, would be in favor of moving ahead with the letter of credit so that we can start buying up some of these properties as soon as possible. I don't think the prices are going to get any lower. So I think we need to grasp this moment. Board members, comments? Commissioner Lambert?
I would just say, being very familiar with the South Dixie corridor and seeing what can happen when a proof of concept is shown, I'm very supportive of the CRA board moving forward on this so that we can show what really can be successful in this area as well.
Okay, any other questions, comments? Is there any objection? It's not a formal vote, we're just trying to get staff some direction. Any objection to moving forward from anyone? Okay, I think you've got the consensus you need to move forward.
Thank you, Mayor.
Chris.
Thank you, board members.
All right. On to appointments. Resolution number 23-26, approving the reappointment of Angela Ogburn to the Community Redevelopment Agency Advisory Board for the Northwood Pleasant City CRA. Mr. Rugg, sorry, is this Anna?
Mayor, we did not have any presentation specifically for
Okay.
each appointment, so I'm happy to talk more about each nominee if you'd like. They're all great members of the CRA Advisory Board.
All right, this is pretty straightforward. Any questions, comments on this? If not, I'll entertain a motion.
Mayor, I move approval of resolution number 23-26.
It's been moved. Is there a second?
Second.
Been moved and seconded. Discussion. Hearing none. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed, like sign. Hearing no opposition, motion carries unanimously. Thank you. Item 7.2, resolution number 23-27, approving the reappointment of Denise Williams to the Community Redevelopment Agency Advisory Board for the Northwood Pleasant City CRA. Questions, comments, commissioners? Hearing none, I'll entertain a motion.
Mayor, I move to approve resolution number 23-27.
It's been moved. Is there a second?
Second.
Been moved and seconded. Discussion. Hearing none. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed, like sign. Hearing no opposition, motion carries unanimously. Thank you. Item 7.3, resolution number 23-29, approving the reappointment of Michael Howe to the Community Redevelopment Agency Advisory Board for the Northwood Pleasant City CRA. Discussion, questions, commissioners? Hearing none, I'll entertain a motion.
Mayor, I move approval of resolution number 23-29.
It's been moved. Is there a second?
Second.
Been moved and seconded. Discussion. Hearing none. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, like sign. Hearing no opposition, motion carries unanimously. Item 7.4, resolution number 23-30, approving the reappointment of William Holland to the Community Redevelopment Agency Advisory Board for the Northwood Pleasant City CRA. Questions, comments, commissioners?
Just
Commissioner Ward?
as it's the final appointment, I just want to say to my other commissioners, this board is so much fun because of all the people that are on it. Everyone's so dedicated. And we had to say goodbye to the previous chair, and we have a new chair and vice chair that are eager to start up. But it's just, I think it's a great representation of when you choose people who are dedicated and a group of people, how great a board can work. And also with staff. I mean, Chris, you've done a fantastic job. I was a resident going to these meetings in the morning and being frustrated all the time, and it's not frustration, it's excitement, and I think that goes to why so many people were at that meeting, because they've been asking, and we're acting, and we're finally seeing some movement, and so with that comes resident support when they see, hey, I've been saying this, and I want to see it, and they are seeing it, so thank you, and I will make a motion to approve resolution number 23-30.
It's been moved. Is there a second?
Second.
Been moved and seconded. Discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, like sign. Hearing no opposition, motion carries unanimously. Thank you. Item 8.1, resolution number 23-25, approving an agreement among City Place North 1 LLC, 515 Fern Owner LLC, the CRA, and the city for the conveyance of the CRA-owned property located at 900 6th Street to the developers for the relocation of 2 historic structures, the renovation of the structures, and the sale of the homes as workforce housing to qualified buyers. Ms. Aponte?
Good afternoon, Mayor, Commissioners, or CRA board members. We're going to do this presentation as a pair with Jordan Ratliff from Related is going to be a part of the presentation. I want to first give you a little bit of background of what are we seeing this today. And it's an interesting process as we see our city grow and transform into a vibrant city. Definitely the historic structures and the historic fabric will be impacted, and we'll have to take decisions of how to evolve this. And in some cases, we are able to accommodate the historic buildings that have most value and making them part of the new projects, like it's gonna be done with the one Flagler, the historic church is preserved, and then the new building is accommodated behind, and they all match, and they will live together in a better urban environment tied to the new city that we are creating. In other cases, this is not possible. Like in this case that you're gonna see today, we have a small single-family house that now is in the middle of a business district that does not fit the context any longer. So the code...
Before you go on, Ms. Sullivan and Valley Bank, thank you so much for your interest in our line of credit. We truly appreciate it.
Well, we just thank you for the relationship, and we want to see it grow, so let me know what you need.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Sorry, Ms. Aponte.
No problem. The code has set provisions for these cases and clearly stipulates that in those cases when a redevelopment occurs and the projects are intended to even put additional development capacity, the developer needs to accommodate or integrate the existing structure as part of the new development, or in other cases they need to relocate it. And that's why we are here today. There are 2 structures on Evernia Street that have been identified that have historic value. They are not designated, but that have historic value for the community. And they are located in a site that is going to be redeveloped with the new vibrant city that we are creating with 25-story buildings for office and in some cases residential. So Related approached the CRA with the idea to relocate these 2 structures to the Northwest neighborhood. They went to a process, and we support the idea because the 2 historic houses will fit very well in the context of the single-family neighborhood of the Northwest neighborhood. So Jordan is here, and he's going to explain you all the approvals that he has gone through to reach this point.
Thank you, Jordan Rathliff, on behalf of the applicant. Thank you, CRA staff, for working with us this today. And just to give the board members a quick overview of what we've done, there's 2 existing homes that sit in the downtown, 520 Evernia and 610 Evernia. And as Ms. Aponte noted, they are not historic structures today, but they are eligible to be able to take advantage of the city's TDR program to be designated historic, and the code does allow for that to take place and be relocated elsewhere in the city to still take advantage of that program. Just to give you some context, for the site that they are proposed to be relocated to in the Northwest on 6th and Douglas, They would actually sit adjacent to each other, both homes with their front door on Douglas. And as part of this process, we were required to first go to Historic Preservation Board, where they were designated, or they were approved to be designated once relocated and renovated. So the idea is that both these homes will be relocated to their new home, fully rehabbed per the current city historic preservation standards on the exterior, and then the interior would have to be fully renovated to a quality and condition approved by staff. But the notion is that took place initially in December, and we extended an agreement with Historic Preservation on our timeframe to finalize this agreement with the CRA, given that they are the owners of the land where they were proposed to be relocated. In the interim, the Historic Preservation Board has required us to maintain those homes and prevent a security and maintenance plan to ensure that they stay in good quality before they're relocated. And that related, it takes full ownership responsibility for those homes in the interim period from when they are actually relocated to on-site to their new home and fully renovated. So if there's any issues in that interim period, the CRA bears no cost or responsibility. That's fully borne by the developer. I won't read through all these, but I just want to highlight a few of the conditions that we've negotiated with CRA staff. Between the time the agreement is signed and that the land can be made available for the homes that are relocated is 30 months. This gives time for us to finalize interior and exterior plans, the ability to find suitable contractor to move the homes, and then ultimately to renovate the homes. As I mentioned, Historic Preservation will sign off on the full exterior renovation program, so what that design looks like. And then the interior will be fully signed off by CRA staff in terms of what the final condition is of the full renovation of the interior of the residences. And I know one of the problems in the past that the CRA staff and this board has had is these homes are moved to the Historic Northwest and kind of left in disrepair. So one of the conditions is as soon as the house is moved, a 12-month clock ticks. And within that 12 months, we have to fully renovate the homes and make them available for sale. So they won't sit there in a bad condition for an extended period of time. That the concept is they get relocated, they get renovated, and have to be sold to the public market within that 12-month period. And again, not to hit all of these restrictions, but just one of the items I'd like to highlight as part of discussions with CRA staff, once the homes are made, they can only be sold to individuals making 140% of AMI or less. So this provides the opportunity for restricting the total value of the house that can be sold once it's renovated and put to market. That's the kind of the broader concept of what the qualified buyer is. The general terms of what that offer has to look like from buyers is just generally the standard realtor form that you see if you were buying a single family house today. So we tried to just lay out what the conditions of a qualified offer would be. But these are all kind of general market conditions that you would find in any home sale outside of the 140% AMI restriction that will be put in place. And I think I'm going to have Ms. Aponte kind of expand on that a little bit and talk about the types of buyers that CRA staff is most keen on making these homes available to once they go to market.
So with this idea, this project was basically targeted as a community benefit. So as Mr. Radlev said, the structure shall be sold to a qualified buyer with an annual income less than 140% of the AMI. Under the 2023 restrictions for a family of four, that is basically a family that has an income of 136,360. So you know these incomes they change every year. They're adjusted by the Florida Housing Finance Corporation. So that's the table and the information that we will base our assessment on. In addition, the intention is to create a first look program for this. So before the developer can put the houses out on the market for the general public, they're gonna give the city 60 days for what we call the first look. This will be promoted by the city because it's directed to for the first 30 days for City of West Palm Beach first responders and teachers, and the second 30 days will be directed to city and CRA employees and residents and business owners of the historic Northwest neighborhood. So the concept is like before anyone else can apply for these houses, we have a specific group of people that we are targeting and helping them to submit the information and qualify for these houses. And then once they submit the information, it will basically be the first qualify will be in the line. We have worked on deed restrictions for the properties. So on the first buyer will have to be owner occupied, so they cannot buy it for renting. And then for the resale of the structure, the intention is that the resale of the structure had to be done also to a qualified buyer with also a maximum of 100%, 140% of the AMI for the first 10 years after the first closing. So after 10 years, if they have owned the house for 10 years, they can resell it to market value. But if they want to resell it within those 10 years, they have to be sold to a qualified buyer. And we also included some provisions in case the restrictions make the sale too difficult. We kind of agree that if the house are not sold after 6 months to be in the market because nobody wants to take it due to the restrictions, then the restriction of the 10 years is reduced to 7. And if they still are not sold, then after 12 months, we will renegotiate any type of restrictions on the deed with that. We look at also some of what could be the final price for these houses. Based on an analysis of comparable sales in the area, the last 2 years they have 16 recorded closed sales of houses that are not part of a portfolio, so individual houses, with an average of $220 per square foot. So this is kind of the market. Then the houses will be priced basically to what a family of an income with 140% of AMI can afford. This is calculated based on 3 times your income. That's the maximum that you can afford in a mortgage, and currently will be $408,000. The final price will be determined once the year, whenever, if it is in 12 months or 24 months, that will be the amount based on the AMI and the amount. And then we will determine that basically in some cases, the larger house probably will have to be subsidized to come lower, and the smaller house will be able to sell to a reasonable price. That concludes the staff presentation. The staff is recommending approval for Resolution 2325, approving an agreement among City Place North 1 LLC, 515 Fern Owner LLC, the CRA, and the city for the conveyance of the CRA-owned property located at 906th Street to the developer for the relocation and renovation of 2 historic structures and the sale of the homes as workforce housing to qualified buyers. The strategic finance plan for the CRA identifies improvements of the residential fabric of the neighborhood as important goals, and we believe this relocation achieves that. The properties are currently vacant, so relocating these 2 historic houses into the neighborhood will enhance the quality of the neighborhood. There is also a companion resolution 22223 that is scheduled for the approval of the City Commission later today. That concludes my presentation, and we're ready to answer any questions that you have.
Thank you. Go back to slide 16.
Which one?
16.
16.
The one right before the line, the penultimate slide. Keep going. 16.
16, we don't, maybe,
I thought, okay.
11.
The one that showed the comparables.
Oh yeah, this one.
Okay, that's 12. Okay, I'm sorry. So the average sales price in homes in the progressive Northwest, $323,000?
Yep, we have records, the maximum, $465,000.
Wow. And that's why we have, that tangibly demonstrates why we have a problem with affordable housing. $323,000.
And also these houses most likely are not renovated, as the ones that are going to be in the market with these 2 historic houses, they're going to be fully renovated and improved. So it's definitely a good value.
Well, that's great news for some. Okay, any questions, Commissioner Ward?
I assume that with these improvements, just because of all the issues with insurance right now, that we're going to be maxing out when it comes to hurricane, the roofs and the windows, making sure that we do everything possible to have a low insurance rate.
So as part of the renovation, they will have to meet current code, so roof, windows, everything that comes with that is part of the requirements and part of the renovation.
Any other questions, Commissioner Fox?
Thank you so much. I'm really excited to see this happening. 6th Street is one of my favorite adopted streets in this city, and I think we have a lot of new homeowners on that street. We have a lot of kids now. I think what's missing is that the CRA has several properties on that street that while they're vacant, it makes it harder to have as many eyes on the street as we should have, and I'm excited to have more home ownership on this street. I guess my question is, I'm looking at the timeline that was presented, and I know that these are kind of maximum amount of months that it might be, but is there a chance that it's going to actually be sooner than that? Just curious, because would love to start having more neighbors on the street sooner.
I think so. I'm looking at Mr. Radlev. I mean, they need to relocate at least one of the structures sooner than that because they have the plans for the 515 Fern Street project to move forward. So they need to move that one much faster. And my guess is they probably going to try to move both at the same time because it's most cost effective.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? We do have a card. Darren Studstill.
Good afternoon, Darren Studstill, 401 North Rosemary. I am also excited about, the progress of the Northwest, but I just want to bring something up on the front end because we haven't had an update on the last historic properties that was moved to our area, and I know we've had some situations since we had the representative from Related here and also to you, Mr. Rug, is the process when that property comes over to us. We have faced before a lot of vandalism and different things before. I would just like us to get together to talk about that process. If we can do a better job lighting the properties at night and
Madam
doing
Clerk,
those
can you
things.
start the clock? Excuse me. Can you start the clock, please? Are you trying to start it?
Yeah, I already paid off.
You got a free 5 seconds, man.
Thank you for that. I'll give you lunch later.
Okay. I know how you did that. Hey, but at the city commission meeting, don't make that mistake, okay? I'm just saying.
But I just want to talk about the process. I know we have a community meeting coming up, but right now, if we can have that conversation now, I think we can avoid some of the things of the past. I'm a team player, but at the same time, I don't like when properties come into our neighborhood and they're vandalized and things happen. We've had a fire before, and we want the increases. I'm a property owner over there. I want the increases in the value, but at the same time, I don't want the negative connotation that comes with vandalism, and different things in the neighborhood. So I'm just asking if we can have a discussion in reference to, my main thing is lighting properties up when you're moving them over there and have a sense of security as what is our plan as they come. Because we have a lot of vacant properties. It tends to a lot of dormant and, negative activity. So I just want to have a plan on the front end. Thank you, and it's good to see everybody.
Thank you. And that's a point well taken, and hopefully you heard that, Mr. Ratliff, that we certainly need to secure that property as soon as possible, even before the exterior and interior renovation begins. Any other questions, comments? Hearing none, I will entertain a motion.
Mayor, I move to approve resolution number 23-25.
It's been moved. Is there a second?
Second.
Been moved and seconded. Discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed, like sign. Hearing opposition, motion carries unanimously. Thank you. Item 8.2, resolution number 23-31, consenting to the installation of improvements within CRA property and approving a property improvements and maintenance agreement among HTG Banyan LLC, the City of West Palm Beach, and the West Palm Beach Community Redevelopment Agency regarding the adjacent CRA property, streetscape improvements, and maintenance responsibilities.
Good evening, Mayor. This is regarding a project that also has been recently completed, the Flagler Station project at the corner of Banyan and Tamarind Avenue. It's a 8-story multifamily with 94 residential units, all affordable with for families below 80% of the AMI. The project, it's already completed, but now we need to kind of tie up some loose ends of different things. So a little bit of the background of this: in 2020, the CRA approved Resolution 2052, 2058, and 2059, through which the CRA restricted the use of the property, CRA-owned property on the north side of the Flagler Station. Is the property highlighted in yellow. Is the historic train rail spur that went from the train station on the west side, connecting to the east. And the intention was to basically improve that property as a linear park, as a small green space for the Northwest neighborhood. At the time the Flagler Station came on board, they needed to maximize the width of the property, so it was agreed that in order for them to have openings facing the CRA property on the north, the CRA will be willing to restrict the use of that property as a park, so they could have basically windows right on the property line, and that was a restriction that was imposed by the building department. And the condition was like, due to that, they will commit to basically construct some improvements in the park with an incentive provided by the CRA, $500,000 to build these improvements. And the CRA provided a revocable license agreement and a maintenance agreement, so they will be utilizing the area, but also in charge of the maintenance. So that was the intention. The image on the right is the visual of what was originally approved with the project. And then the project was built, and then at this point, the developer, at the time they hired the contractor to build the park, the project, they did not hire the contractor to build a linear park. So when the project was almost done, they went out to get the cost estimates for the park, and they determined that the $500,000 was not enough for building what it was designed originally. So we are working with the developer to basically value engineer the project, modify the design to be able to fit the $500,000 that was originally budget. There was also a couple of improvements that were done by the building, so we can kind of use those in our benefit. But basically, Resolution 2331 in front of you today provides additional time for the CRA and the developer to agree on the redesign of the park and confirms each party's responsibility on the completion of the project and the maintenance. This has a companion resolution on the city side, is 252-23, that will take care of the maintenance agreement for this project along for the maintenance of the streetscape and landscape install along Tamarind Avenue and Banyan Boulevard. That will be the responsibility of the Flagler Station project, and also the resolution of some fees or not. The developer is responsible for installing some streetscape improvements along Tamarind, but because Tamarind is still under construction, they negotiated with the city that they will pay the cost of those improvements, and the city will install them with the Tamarind project. So these two resolutions are companion items and resolve, as I say, these items around this project to get it to fruition and completion. Staff recommend approval of Resolution 2331, consenting to the installation of improvements within the CRA property and approving a property improvement and maintenance agreement among HTG Banyan LLC, the CRA, and the city for the Flagler Station property right-of-way along the property Banyan and Tamarind and the CRA-owned parcel on the north. That concludes my presentation. If you have any questions.
Thank you very much. Any questions, comments? Hearing none, I will entertain a motion.
Mayor, I move to approve resolution number 23-31.
It's been moved. Is there a second?
Second.
Been moved and seconded. Discussion. Hearing none. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, like sign. Hearing no opposition, motion carries unanimously. Thank you. Item 8.3, Resolution number 23-32, authorizing the CRA contribution of the Historic Preservation Bonus Assessment related to the approval of the District at Northwood project. Ms. Aponte?
Mayor, Commissioner, this item in front of you tonight is regarding the district at Northwood, or Northwood Square, as it was originally known. The project is currently completing the approvals, and as part of that process to complete all the approvals in site plan and building permit, the project is required the payment of the Historic Preservation Height Bonus Assessment, through which the proposed project was allowed to increase its height from 6 stories to 8 stories. That was part of the approval that was of the code changes that were implemented by the city in 2018 to allow this project to move forward. The city had not established the exact amount of the Historic Preservation High Bonus Assessment fee at the time the project was submitted, and that fee is not established at this point yet. So the CRA, the city, and the developer, in order to move the project ahead, we agreed to a total contribution of $65,000 for this project. The CRA will basically has agreed to contribute that amount of money to the Northwood Historic Preservation Fund on behalf of the Northwood Square project. in order to kind of continue the project and move this project ahead. That is one of the priorities of the district. The Northwood Historic Preservation Fund will be utilized for the preservation efforts within the historic Northwood district as directed by the City Commission. So the CRA feels like the funds will still be utilized within the district for improvements within the district. So it feels kind of still the goals of the entire CRA district. Staff recommends approval of Resolution 2332, authorizing the CRA contribution of the historic preservation bonus assessment for the Northwood Square project. There's also in front of you Resolution 2334F that authorized the transfer of the CRA funds in fiscal 23-24 to provide for the funding of the payment of the historic preservation bonus assessment. The advisory board reviewed this proposal and recommended approval 9-1 at its September 29, 23 meeting. And there's also a companion city resolution to this item, Resolution 251-23, and it's scheduled for to be presented in front of the City Commission tonight also. That concludes the staff presentation.
Thank you very much. Any questions, comments, commissioners? Hearing none, I will entertain a motion.
Mayor, I move to approve resolution number 23-32.
It's been moved. Is there a second? It's been moved and seconded. Discussion. Hearing none. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed, like sign. Hearing no opposition, motion carries unanimously. Thank you. Now we will go to item 8.5, which will now become item 8.4. Resolution number 23-34F, authorizing the transfer of CRA funds in fiscal year 2023/2024 to provide funding for a building height bonus agreement for the Northwood Square project. Mr. Ponte?
That is the resolution I just presented, Mayor.
Okay.
The
All
F
right.
resolution.
So we just need a motion then. All right. Any questions or comments on this item? Hearing none, I'll entertain a motion.
Mayor, I move approval of resolution number 23-34F.
It's been moved. Is there a second?
Second.
Been moved and seconded. Discussion. Hearing none. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed, like sign. Hearing no opposition, motion carries unanimously. Thank you. Now we will turn to item 8.4, which is now item 8.5. Resolution number 23-33, approving the First Amendment to the interlocal funding agreement between the West Palm Beach Community Redevelopment Agency and the City of West Palm Beach for funding Phase 2 of the consulting services for the city's Banyan Parking Garage redevelopment project, not to exceed $77,580. Mr. Rube?
Thank you, Mayor. Board members, Christopher Rugg, Executive Director of the West Palm Beach Community Redevelopment Agency. Excited to bring this item for you today based on a lot of private sector feedback that I've gotten following the work session that occurred surrounding the Banyan Garage back in June, on June 11th, I believe it was. I have the date in here. Anyways, I'm going to do a quick overview to talk about how we got to this point. I am going to go over some of that feedback that I got for the board to consider. As a result of that feedback, we did take the liberty of drafting an interlocal should the board choose to decide to move forward, and how that falls into the phases of the overall project surrounding the Banyan Garage, and then happy to answer any questions that you all may have. Just as a quick recap, the Banyan Garage is in the heart of our downtown, sandwiched between the Flagler Banyan Square, which is the old City Hall site, and Drama Works just to the south. It borders Banyan Boulevard, Olive Avenue, and Narcissus in our downtown. It's a bit dated, as you can see by the picture, and is ripe for redevelopment currently. And just another quick recap, this has been a source of ongoing discussion with the City Commission and the CRA Board, going back to 2015 when we did the initial needs assessment, and then also part of the overall Shore to Core project. And then since then, a variety of other items, including the idea of having a public-private partnership, which was really the desire by the board in order to sort of maximize some of the efforts from the private sector. And went ahead and had that work session a few years ago, and have funded the interlocal earlier this year and conducted that analysis with the concourse group. So phase one was completed. Just as a quick recap, that was about $76,000 that conducted that study. And in it, we met with all of the with all of the departments and created that report, which is ready and should be shared with you if it hasn't been already. And that included market information, all of that feedback, and then as well as the responses from the community when we did the outreach component of that study. And that was presented June 13th, that was the date. And that's where the board, the city commission, gave the direction to really study and understand how parking will be mitigated or addressed in order to minimize disruptions while a project is underway. And that was kind of where the direction was set, if you all recall, at that city commission work session, to really understand, okay, well, we need to get our hands around this parking issue before we can really discuss much more. Shortly after that work session, my phone started to ring, and it was not a coordinated effort. It was actually several folks that have expressed lots of interest on this Banyan Garage. It was 3 different developers, and they all had the exact same message. Chris, we can solve many of the, or we can answer many of the questions that the board had, and we can answer those mitigation questions that they were asking. And if we could just do that through some type of formal response to the city, we would be very open to do that. And these, the developers that, I'm sorry, I think I mentioned it. Nope, hold on, excuse me. If I could talk a little bit more about these developers, the developers that had reached out to me without naming them have all done projects in the past in the city. And they currently, they have done projects in the past or currently have projects done in the city. And what they have done would be similar to what I think the expectations are for the redevelopment of the Banyan Garage. So these are essentially, to summarize, these are urban infill developers that have experience with that. So when I was discussing this with staff and others, the thought was that perhaps we just include the parking strategy into an ITN, draft it, obviously share it with all of the board members prior to it going out, issue that ITN, and then evaluate up to 6 proposals. And I use that number specifically because to date, 6 different companies have expressed interest in at least pursuing some type of bid or ITN if it were to be sent out on behalf of the city. So the interlocal agreement is part of the resolution tonight, and it would approve the interlocal funding to do the second phase, which is with Concourse Group, and that's that $77,580, and that would be used to help have Concourse on board. They would help us draft the ITN and then go through each of the proposals after we receive them, do an analysis on those proposals, and then essentially report back to the board on their feelings of which one may sort of be the best fit, or at least give some direction on the different components of each proposal. And then the ITN, just to be clear, would include an ask of the developers to specifically provide details on how they would mitigate that parking like the board asked at that work session. And in addition to it, what other types of uses that they would include in addition to the parking. And then, of course, everything else that the board would be looking to understand financial ability, the experience with their projects, and then any other items that had come up from staff, which there were a lot of asks that were put into the overall report. So those would also obviously be commented on by the development community, or we would ask them to do that. So as it relates to the project phases, we've conducted phase 1, that's done. And so essentially this would be the phase 2 process, the solicitation process. Phase 3, should the board actually select, or the city commission. And that's one thing to note, is that we're actually operating concourse group under the city's contract, which is why we need the interlocal agreement. I failed to mention that earlier. So should the city commission decide that they like one of the proposals and wanted to get into negotiations, we had planned for concourse to help with those negotiations and the closing, but that would require another step and another approval by this board should they decide to move forward with that. This is the cost breakdown for each phase. Don't really have a cost on phase 3, but looking at the first 2 phases, I think it's safe to budget about $80,000 should that come forward. And then the idea is that those proposals, we would expect to have it completed December, January, and have that presentation to the board in a relatively quick turnaround based on sort of the excitement that we're receiving from the private sector to date, sort of striking while the iron's hot, if you will. So happy to answer any questions, but judging by the enthusiasm that we're receiving with this location and just generally the ongoing inquiries from the private sector, I would recommend that we at least look into this matter and see what's out there. There is no obligation to move forward, but I think we would get a lot of answers and definitely information that would be useful for the board for future decisions. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you for that presentation. Questions, comments, commissioners? Commissioner Fox?
Thank you so much, Chris. So I just want to go over what we're talking about today. Today, we're voting on whether or not we want to move forward with phase 2 of the interlocal funding agreement, but we're not necessarily talking about what the ITN will look like, or if we have questions about that process. That is not what we're voting on tonight.
That is correct. I just wanted to give the board some idea of what we would include in an ITN, but this would allow CRA staff and the city attorney and others to sort of work with concourse group on that ITN, and then we would bring that back and obviously share it individually with board members on what would be included, specifically the components and the language that would be in that ITN.
Okay, great. So we'll have the opportunity to look at that before it goes out.
Absolutely.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Hearing none, I will entertain a motion.
Mayor, I move to approve resolution number 23-33.
It's been moved. Is there a second?
Second.
Been moved and seconded. Discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed, like sign. Hearing no opposition, motion carries unanimously. And that is the final item on the agenda, so the CRE meeting is hereby adjourned.